Welcome to Sleepy Classic Tales. Today we are listening to a calm retelling of a story about decay, fear, and the slow breaking apart of an old house. The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, published in 1839. Part 1. On a dull, silent day, I approach the House of Usher. Even from a distance, it appears strange and unwelcoming. The walls are old, gray, and marked by fine cracks, as if time and isolation had slowly eaten away at them. No sound can be heard, no sign of life. Everything seems suspended. The sight fills me with an inexplicable unease. It is not the house alone, but the atmosphere surrounding it. The landscape appears lifeless. The sky hangs heavily over the dark walls, and a pale tarn reflects the building so perfectly that reality and reflection are almost indistinguishable. I am here because I received a letter written by Edgar Usher, an old friend from my youth. His words were restless, full of hints of illness and inner torment. He urgently asked me to visit him. Now, standing before his house, I sense that his distress is greater than his letter suggested. When I enter the estate, an oppressive silence surrounds me. The corridors are long and dark, the furnishings old and heavy. Everything feels crowded, as though nothing has changed for generations. Dust lies on the furniture, and even the light seems subdued, unable to drive away the darkness. Edgar Usher finally receives me. I barely recognize him. His face is pale and sunken, his eyes large and restless. Every movement seems strained, every gesture accompanied by nervous tension. He speaks softly, almost in a whisper, as if a loud word might shatter the fragile balance that still keeps him upright. He speaks of his illness without being able to name it. It is not purely physical, but something deeper and intangible. Sounds torment him, light pains him, and even simple impressions overwhelm him. He lives in constant fear without knowing precisely what he fears. His twin sister Madeline is also ill. She lives withdrawn in a remote part of the house. Roderick speaks of her with concern, but also with a strange distance, as if she were both part of him and yet unreachable. As I listen, I feel that this house is more than a place. It seems connected to its inhabitants, as though it shares their fate. The walls, the cracks, the silence, all appear like a reflection of the inner state of the Usher family. Even now it becomes clear to me that my visit will not be an ordinary one. Something ominous hangs in the air, something slowly and inevitably unfolding. In the following days, I spend much time with Edgar Usher. He seems to need my presence, not out of joy, but out of fear of being alone. Yet every encounter is exhausting. His mood shifts without clear reason. At times he speaks rapidly and passionately, then he falls into long, silent stillness. He tells me about the history of his family. The Ushers, he says, have changed little over generations. Few connections to the outside world, few new influences. The bloodline remained pure, but that purity came at a price. Illness, mental fragility, and an overly sensitive nervous system were the inheritance of this isolation. The longer I listen, the clearer it becomes that Roderick suffers not only in body. Something within him is out of balance. He speaks of an undefined dread that accompanies him day and night, not fear of a specific event, but of the mere continuation of his existence. His senses seem heightened. Sounds are almost unbearable to him. Even quiet tones make him flinch. Certain colors, especially bright light, cause him pain. Only soft, muted music seems to calm him for a time. Often he sits at an old instrument and plays melancholy melodies that seem to permeate the entire house. While he plays, I have the impression that the walls themselves are listening. The sound lingers unnaturally long, as if the house wishes to retain it. I catch myself wondering whether the building is not merely a structure but possesses some form of awareness. I rarely see Madeline. Occasionally I pass her in a corridor, silent, pale, almost weightless. She moves past me like a shadow without noticing me. Her illness appears to have detached her entirely from the world. Roderick speaks little of her, and when he does, his voice carries both concern and dread. It is as if her fate and his are inseparably bound. With each day, I sense that something is approaching its end. Not abruptly, not violently, but slowly, like a process long underway. The House of Usher seems to stand as a silent witness, or perhaps as an active participant in this unavoidable decay. I begin to understand that Roderick's invitation was not accidental. He did not seek only company. He sought someone to witness what is happening here. And I fear I cannot escape that role. Roderick's condition continues to worsen. His fear no longer appears merely nervous or exaggerated, but almost compelled, as if it has a concrete source. He speaks of the house itself influencing him, that the walls, the floor, the very air have an effect upon body and mind. At first, I attribute these thoughts to his illness, yet the longer I remain in the house, the more difficult it becomes to dismiss them entirely. The atmosphere is oppressive, even in quiet moments. It feels as though an invisible pressure hangs over everything. Roderick tells me of old family legends, of the belief that the House of Usher and its inhabitants form a single entity, that the decay of one inevitably brings about the decay of the other. To him, these ideas are not superstition, but knowledge. One day, we receive word that Madeline has died. Roderick reacts with a strange mixture of grief and relief. He speaks quietly, almost composed, yet his face reveals deep shock. I sense that this death means more to him than the loss of a sister. Roderick insists that Madeline not be buried immediately. Instead, her body is to be placed for several days in a vault within the house. He justifies this with medical uncertainty, yet his voice reveals hesitation. The request unsettles me, but I do not oppose him. Together, we carry the coffin into a deep chamber far from the living quarters. The vault is damp, cold, surrounded by thick walls. As we set the coffin down, I feel the troubling sense that we are doing something that should not be done. In the days that follow, Roderick changes further. He seems tense, listening to every sound, startled by every creak of the floorboards. He scarcely sleeps. His fear now seems to have a clear target, though he does not name it. At night, I sit awake and listen to the silence of the house. At times, I think I hear muffled sounds from below, yet I attribute them to imagination. Nevertheless, a feeling of dread grows within me that I can no longer dismiss. The House of Usher seems to breathe. It groans and echoes in a way that unsettles me. I begin to realize that we are no longer in the realm of ordinary events. Something has been set in motion, and it will not stop until it reaches its end. The days after Madeline's death pass in a strange suspension. Roderick seems unable to distinguish clearly between waking and sleep. His eyes are red, his body tense, as though expecting something unavoidable at any moment. He speaks little, yet when he does, his words circle the same thoughts again and again. He says he can still feel Madeline, not as memory, but as presence. He is convinced that her death was not final, that something of her remains within the house. I attempt to reassure him, speaking of grief, imagination, and the power of fear, but my words no longer reach him. I too begin to feel uneasy. The house grows increasingly hostile. The corridors seem longer, the shadows deeper. Sounds echo without clear source. Even by day, the light remains pale, as though entering reluctantly through the windows. At night, the sounds increase. A faint knocking, a distant scraping, dull blows that seem to come from the lower parts of the house. Roderick hears them as well. He is convinced they come from the vault. His fear intensifies into certainty. One evening, Roderick sits opposite me, unable to remain still. His hands tremble, his gaze fixed. He says he has made a terrible mistake, that Madeline was not dead, only in a death-like state, that he has entombed her alive. His words strike me hard. I tried to dismiss them as the product of his fear, yet the sounds we hear can no longer be ignored. They grow louder, nearer, more insistent. Every impact seems to travel through the entire house. Outside, a storm gathers. Wind and rain lash against the walls as though testing the building. The house answers with groans and creaks as if it were part of the turmoil. Roderick becomes frantic. His terror is now open and overwhelming. I remain with him out of duty and growing concern, but deep within I recognize that we are approaching a point beyond which nothing can be stopped. The House of Usher seems to draw inward, as if preparing for something. Whatever is happening below will not remain hidden. The storm intensifies through the night. Rain strikes the windows, wind howls around the house and makes the old walls tremble. Roderick appears paralyzed. He sits, rigid, eyes wide, as if listening not only to the sounds of the house, but to something deeper and unseen. To calm him, I take up a book and begin reading aloud an old tale of chivalric adventure. My voice sounds steady at first, yet soon something strange occurs. The noises described in the story seem to merge with reality. When the text speaks of metallic clashing, a similar sound echoes through the house. When a door is forced open in the tale, a dull crash answers from somewhere within the building. Coincidence, I tell myself. Yet the parallels continue. Roderick stops breathing. His hands clutch the armrest. He whispers that none of it is coincidence, that the house is responding, that Madeline is approaching. His voice is barely audible, yet carries a certainty that chills me. The sounds grow louder. Heavy, dragging steps are now clearly heard. They draw nearer. Every movement seems to pass through walls and floors. I set the book aside, unable to continue. The boundary between imagination and reality has long since vanished. Suddenly, the door opens. Madeline stands in the room. Pale, blood-stained, swaying, yet undeniably alive. Her gaze is empty, her body marked by what she has endured. Without a word, she moves toward her brother. Roderick cries out, a cry of recognition more than fear. Madeline collapses upon him, and in that moment, his strength ends. Brother and sister fall together, united in death. I stand frozen. The house seems to hold its breath. Then it begins to tremble. A deep fissure runs through the walls, as though the tension within has been released. I flee the building, driven by the certainty that no stone will remain in place. I run from the house into the storm. Rain lashes my face, wind tears at my clothes. Behind me, a deep, rumbling sound arises, as if the building itself were groaning. Even as I retreat, I sense that something final is occurring. I stop and turn. In the dim light, I see the fissure widening clearly through the facade. The walls begin to separate. Windows shatter, stones fall, and a heavy crash fills the air. The House of Usher does not collapse suddenly, but with dreadful, solemn slowness. It is as though it follows an inner law now fulfilled. Each part seems to know when to yield. No resistance, no struggle, only surrender. The dark tarn before the house begins to stir. The reflection trembles and distorts until it disappears. Then the walls fall inward. Towers, roof, and stone sink into themselves, accompanied by one final, deep thunder. For a moment, all is still. The storm continues, yet the house is gone. Where its dark silhouette once stood, only emptiness remains. The tarn closes silently over the ruins, as if the house had never existed. I stand there, unable to comprehend what I have witnessed. The Usher family is extinguished, their house destroyed, their name vanished. No sign remains, no monument, no trace, only memory. Within me mingle relief and horror. I know I have witnessed something beyond illness and chance. The house and its inhabitants were inseparably bound. When one fell, the other had to follow. I leave the place that same night. The storm accompanies me for a time, then slowly loses strength. With each step, the House of Usher recedes until it is only memory. No light, no sound, no sign indicates that people once lived there. Within me, the events echo. I try to make sense of them, yet they defy simple explanation. Was it illness? Madness? Coincidence? Or was the house itself part of the fate, as alive as its inhabitants? Roderick believed his suffering came from within himself alone, yet perhaps it was never possible to separate him from that place. Perhaps everything was bound together from the beginning. Bloodline, walls, mind. The decay did not begin at the end. It had always been there. The further I move away, the clearer it becomes that I witnessed a closed circle. Nothing remained to continue. No inheritance, no renewal. The House of Usher has fallen as it lived, in isolation. In the quiet after the storm, I understand that some places cannot simply be left. They shape those who dwell within them, form their fears and thoughts until no distinction remains between human and surroundings. I return to my life, yet something stays with me. Not fear, but knowledge. That what is suppressed does not rest forever, and that whatever is held beneath the surface too long will eventually rise. Thus, the story ends not with a sudden explosion, but with the gradual disappearance of everything that once stood. The fall of the House of Usher is complete, silent, final, irrevocable. And with that, today's story comes to an end. Perhaps you are now wondering how our short version differs from Edgar Allan Poe's original text, why no one intervenes even though the catastrophe is felt early on, and how much of Poe's own fears and experiences echo in this dark tale. We explore these and other questions in our accompanying book, Golden Pages, Volume 2. You will find the link in the description. Good night, and if you like, we will listen to each other again tomorrow on Sleepy Classic Tales.